This is crazy, but this podcast actually started 30 years ago in a prison cell. I was 19 years old, had just been sentenced to 15 years in prison. I believed I would die in that cell, but at some point, there was a shift. A shift that caused me to ask myself, how can I break the cycle? How do I overcome all the setbacks? How do I achieve my hopes and dreams and the life that I deserve? This is a podcast about that shift. This is a podcast about survival. This is a podcast about picking yourself up after life has knocked you down. My name is Humphrey, and this is my podcast, Time to Rise. We are back, and you know what time it is. It is time. It's time to rise. It is time to rise. Hey, I've always wanted to do like a brief series on leadership. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago when I did my Valentine's Day podcast. I was thinking about a leadership podcast, or not a leadership podcast, but a leadership series. So today's podcast, there's no thinking about it. Today's podcast would be for those of you that you're in a leadership position, or maybe you would like to be in a leadership position. But it's also for those of you that maybe you don't believe you are a leader or that you have leadership characteristics. This podcast is for you as well. So stay tuned and don't go nowhere. So today's podcast, I'm titling it, You Were Chosen to Lead. That's right. You were chosen to lead. Many people don't know this, but I'm a veteran of the United States Navy. I joined the military out of high school, and after boot camp, I served in the Persian Gulf War, earned the Kuwait Liberation Medal. I probably should talk about that more than I do. But I guess, I don't really talk about it much because I suppose that somewhere inside, I feel like going to prison somehow tarnishes that accomplishment. But yeah, that's something I guess no one can take away from me. I am a veteran of the United States Navy, but my issue of not being able to talk about it or believing that prison somehow tarnishes that, I'm working through that. So, but I will bring it up every now and then. So, but I joined the military because I really didn't know who I was. I hadn't yet decided who I wanted to become. I just didn't know. And like so many people, I was just kind of floating or gliding through life. At one point in high school, I had been told by a teacher that I wasn't cut out for college. So I didn't really think that was an option. At that time in high school, when I was in the 10th grade, I lived with my older brother. When I was, when I was 15, I went to live with him, and he was only about 19 years old. But after high school, I really had no plan for life. I just didn't know. And I can remember not wanting to be a burden for my older brother, even though I wasn't. But that was kind of my perception. But I came home one day and I said, hey, I just joined the Navy. And my brother, he looks at me and says, "Fool, don't you know it's about to be a war?" That's my older brother. He says what's on his mind, but I know that was his way of saying, hey, little brother, maybe you should think about this. But it was already done. I had already enlisted. But the military, I can say it was a great experience for me. I can say that my first real leadership lessons maybe started there. However, when I look at leaderships When I look at leadership, when I look at leadership lessons learned, here's what I know. Leadership, it's a lifelong lesson. You can learn leadership skills or lessons in many different places, no matter who you are or no matter really what your background is. You see, here's what I believe. I believe that everyone is chosen to lead, but not everyone will choose to. Yep. I'm going to say that again. I believe that everyone was chosen or will be chosen to lead, but not everyone will choose to. And here's what I mean quickly is I believe that at some point in time, every last one of us will be in a position where we're given the opportunity to lead. And it's up to us whether or not we choose to. Oftentimes, we may not choose to because we lack the confidence. We may not choose to because we may not be mature enough. But you'll be given another opportunity. You'll be placed in another opportunity to lead at some point. And hopefully at some point, we all will step up and make that decision and choose to lead. But like a lot of things in life, I believe that even leadership starts with a choice. It begins with you making the decision to lead. Now, I know some might disagree, but these are my opinions. And if you disagree or if you look at things differently, please shoot me an email or comment, and we can have a discussion, a dialogue. But I guess for me, I don't want anyone to believe that they weren't born with natural leadership qualities. And here's what I know. I don't know anyone that would look at their own child and say or believe that their own child doesn't have not one single leadership quality. So to me, that adds to my point that we're all chosen to lead, but not everyone chooses to. But again, I'll say this again. I believe that it begins with a choice. At some point, we must choose to create our vision. We must choose to be courageous because not everyone's going to agree with you. You must choose to create connections. You must choose to be consistent. And you must choose to take charge at times when you may not even be in charge. So today, I just want to look at one of those things. And I want to look at the importance of, when I say vision, what I mean today is I want to look at the importance of looking back. We'll save the courage, consistency, connection, and the others for another podcast. But I've heard it said that you shouldn't look in the rearview mirror because you're not going that way. And although I understand what that means, I would have to, I guess, I would have to disagree because I believe that when it comes to becoming a leader, or even when it comes to accomplishing your hopes and your dreams, when it comes to if you're an entrepreneur, when it comes to achieving any level of success, I believe that it requires a vision. Now, earlier I said a clear vision, but you need a vision. So oftentimes it's not very clear in the beginning. But I'm saying you need a vision, but not just of your future, but sometimes more importantly of your past. So what am I saying? I'm saying sometimes you need to know not only where you're going, but you have to know and you have to understand where you've been. And that requires you to look back. There's no other way. It requires you to look back, not to go back. but simply just maybe take a peek. Take a peek back because it's your past. That's where your life started. It's your past that gave you life. It's your past. That's one of the major contributing factors of who you are today. Now, for me, that lesson became pretty clear to me while I was in prison. Now, if you wanted to become a better leader, of course, I'm not suggesting you take the same route that I took. But at some point, I made a decision that I wanted to become a better leader, a positive leader. I made a decision that I wanted to be a better person. I made a decision that I wanted to be successful, but I wasn't sure how. And I think we all stand at that crossroad at some point in time. But like many inmates, I spent a lot of time in the library reading books. My personal preference were, I read books on personal development or leadership. I stayed away from the romance novels. You might not want to be seen reading a romance novel in prison. I'm just kidding. But, the prison, maybe I read all four of the books on leadership that our library had. And after reading those books, being completely honest, I was confused. There were four different books, four different philosophies. And because I was kind of new to the leadership thing or to the conscious leadership thing, I tried to implement every strategy that I read about. So when I look back at that time in my life, I was what I call the crazy confused leader. I read all these different strategies and I attempted to implement each and every last one of them at the same time. Why? Because I had not yet really discovered who I was as a leader or the type of leader I wanted to become. And that may be true for you. But just know that becoming a leader, it takes time. And I believe it's a lifelong learning process. Now, one common thread that I can remember that each of those books had was at some point I read this question: are leaders born or made? And for my sake, I was praying that leaders were made. Now, I guess I'm not really sure that I can still answer that question with 100% certainty, but here's what I believe. Again, you're going to hear me say this. It begins with a choice. Yeah, I'm going to say this again. I believe this with all of my heart. I believe that everyone is chosen to lead. But when their time comes, not everyone chooses to. See, the day I was handed a weapon, I was given a choice. The choice to lead or the choice to follow. And on that day, I chose to follow. When I break down who I was then and how I became the person that I am today, it required me. And it requires me still to oftentimes to take a peek back or to look back. Sitting in the prison cell, I had to tell myself, if I'm to understand, or I had to say to myself, if I'm really to understand how I got here, I don't have a choice. I'm going to have to look back. There just wasn't any other way. As painful as that might have been for me, because if I didn't look back and understand how I got there, how do I learn to recognize and avoid the same path once I stepped out from behind those barbed wire fences? What going to prison taught me is, again, leadership. It is all about choices. It's about making that choice to lead and then deciding, well, really, what type of leader do I want to become? After that choice is made, then we have to decide on the direction. Where are we going? Right now, wherever you are, if you're at work, on your way to work, or at home, if you're at the gym, wherever you're at, what if I ask you this question? How did you get there? Now, if your answer is, well, I got here in a car, or I got here on the bus, or I rode my bike, that's not really what I'm talking about. Because the path to where you are right now, it's pretty long. Maybe you had to take some detours. Maybe you made some mistakes along the way. But here's what I guess what I'm trying to say is a decision that you made yesterday, a month ago, played a part in how you got where you are today. I want you to think about something. If when you go someplace for the very first time, how many of you do this or have done this? You go someplace for the very first time, so you pay close attention to the street signs. You paid close attention to certain landmarks that someone told you that you should look out for. Maybe for some of you, you look back to make sure you had turned on the right street because, again, you weren't really sure exactly where you were going. Here's the reason why I asked that question. It's because if you don't pay attention and you had to get back to the same new location that you visited for the first time a month ago, if you had to get back there, how many of you could get back because you paid close attention to how you got there in the first place? See, I believe that that's the importance of looking back. It's really understanding how you ended up where you currently are. Years ago, I was taking my oldest daughter, let's call her Aaliyah. I was taking our oldest daughter, Aaliyah, to basketball practice. She was about 11 at the time, and her mom would normally take her, but on that day, her mom had a conflict. I believe she had class, she was studying. So it was my first time taking her to practice. Now, I had an idea of where the gym was, but I wasn't 100% sure. And when we got about halfway there, I asked Aaliyah whether or not we were going the right way. And she looks up from her phone and she looks at me, and what do you think she says? She says, I don't know. So I'm looking at her confused. And I asked, how do you not know? You've been coming here for 5 weeks, 2 times a week. But before she could answer, not that she was really preparing to, but I asked another question. I said, do any of these stores look familiar to you? And of course, she looks around and she says, nope. So I said, Elliot, you mean to tell me that you just get in the car and when you get where you're going, you just get out and you don't have any idea of how you got there? With a straight face, some of you that maybe you've had these same conversations with your own kids, but with a straight face, she says, yep. I had to ask one more question. I said, Leah, or at least two more questions. I said, Leah, what if you had to get yourself to practice? And then I asked that question that as parents, we ask, and, I don't know, I think we all ask at some point. I said, what if something happened to me and you had to turn around and get back home? You know what she did? Well, she ignored me. She grabbed her stuff and she ran inside the gym because she was late. But I thought about the question that I asked her. And I thought, sometimes as parents, that's a question we have to ask ourselves. Sometimes as leaders, that's a question we must be able to answer. As entrepreneurs or as individuals with goals, hopes, and dreams, it's a question you must be able to answer. How did I get here? What if I have to turn around and get back to where I started in order to make some changes, in order to do some things differently? See, sometimes I believe we end up in certain situations because we weren't really sure where we were going in the first place. Just gliding along, as I mentioned, I was doing earlier in life. And the consequence of that is that we may find ourselves looking around thinking, how the heck did I get here? Some of you know what I'm talking about because you've asked yourself that very question before. How did I get here? See, with no clear vision, you can end up on a job that you don't like, and before you know it, it's been 10 years. You're comfortable, but you're unhappy. Or maybe it's a relationship or a financial situation. Hmm. Maybe it's a promotion you thought you deserved and you didn't get. But if we look back, you begin to see the opportunities that were missed. You'll see, I guess, using kind of the road construction idea. You'll see the landmarks. You'll see the street signs. You'll see that job offer that was passed up because you had become comfortable doing a job you didn't really like. If you look back, you'll see yourself, or maybe watching TV when you could have been studying for the advancement exam. Now, looking back, it takes courage because it forces you to see all of your mistakes. And as leaders, seeing and recognizing our mistakes and our weaknesses, in my mind, only makes for a stronger leader. So that's part of the importance of looking back. It's also necessary to look back in order to not repeat certain things. It's important because looking back, there are things that we should make sure that we also recognize and continue to do or to repeat. Now, for me, I can't think of many things that gets your attention, like hearing a judge sentence you to 15 years in prison. But that became one of my moments to ask myself, how did I get here? That was my moment to look back. And when I look back on my life, I did see the potholes in the road, surrounding myself with individuals that had no vision. When I look back, I saw the potholes that I had just fallen into. When I look back, I saw the speed bumps that I had just accelerated over. When I look back, I saw, how that man on the construction road, they wave a red flag for you to slow down. They're warning you that, hey, there's something up ahead that you need to be aware of. When I look back, I saw the individuals that were waving those signs saying, hey, you need to make some changes in your life. People that I ignored. When I look back, I saw all the mistakes I made along the way and when I finally found the courage to look back and really examine my life and my mistakes, I saw exactly how I had paved my own road to prison. Hmm. In leadership, looking back allows you to pave your way to success. as a leader, as a person who has goals. Looking back means being open to discussing ideas from other people that worked so that they can be duplicated. Looking back also allows you to see ideas that, again, that were not as successful, so you don't repeat them. And once I look back, I was able to move forward with confidence and courage. I know where I've been. Now I can focus on where I'm going. For me, that's the importance of looking in that rearview mirror, of taking a peek back. So my question to you is one, where are you going? Where are you headed? And how can you use your past to help you get there sooner while minimizing and not repeating mistakes? While I was moving up towards becoming the general manager of a successful business, every year I received a raise and review sheet. And the first year, I tossed the review in the trash after I read it. But every year after that, I saved that review and I would read back through the comments of my past reviews every year. And I would try to make the conscious choice to implement the suggestions to learn from them. But I can remember one of those early reviews that I saved. It said, "You have to stop taking things so personal." Well, I read that. And when I read it, I took it personal and I got upset. I got angry. But in that moment, I understood. And moving forward, I made a conscious effort to recognize when I was taking something personally, when it really wasn't personal. Had I not made the choice to look back at those past reviews, had I not made the choice to not, or had I made the choice to not take those suggestions, I would not be the person, the leader, the man that I am today. So, I guess the point of today's podcast is, yes, you were chosen to lead. But when that time comes for you to actually lead, you'll have to make the choice. And in order to be the best leader that you can be at the time, I'm suggesting that you look back. Because sometimes we have to look back in order to move forward. All right, that's all I have for today. And I believe maybe what I'll do is we'll cover some of the other characteristics in another podcast. But I want to thank you for listening. And no matter how many times life knocks you down, I hope that these messages serve as a reminder that it's not about the knockdown, it's about the get up. And no matter what you're going through, right now is the time to rise. My name is Ian Humphrey. And I don't care if you remember my name, as long as you remember my message. Thanks for rocking with me.